Abyssal Murmurs. Hello everyone. Today we come to the next horror stories. Let's start. Story 1. The Black Figured. I was about 15 at the time. One of my sister received a call from one of my auntie from Sacramento asking if we can help babysit both of her kids. It was summer at the time, so my sister and I took the offer, since there wasn't anything to do. As we got there from Merced, I had felt this uneasy feeling around me like something was watching me. As we opened the door, you would see a stairway along with paintings to the second floor of the house. In these paintings, there would be painting of these two sisters, about the age of 7 and 9, fishing on a boat, smiling. It felt almost as if they were looking at you directly. At the end of the stairway, there are 4 rooms facing each other. I shared a bed with one of my nephews, and we would play Pokemon on the Nintendo Ds all day. A few days later, I remembered waking up from a call downstairs from my sister asking us all to go down and eat breakfast. At that time, it was my nephew, my sister, and my niece that was with me in the room. As they all went down to eat, I thought I will stay and charge my Nintendo DS and play it a bit longer, because I was about to catch one of the legendary Pokemon. As I charged up the DS, the door across from me slowly opened itself. As it opened, I saw this huge black figure. Although I didn't see its face, I know for a fact we made eye to one another. A few seconds later, he disappeared within the walls behind him. I figured what I saw must have thought that everyone had left to the first floor of the house. Ever since that day, my sister has witnessed a black figure crawling its way through the hallway at night. A few days later, when we told my auntie about this, they called upon a shaman. The shaman touched the walls and the painting while going up stairways. She came back telling us all that what lived in this house was an Indian boy. He told the shaman that he disliked a painting in this house, and if we do not do anything about it, he will harm one of us. That day, we threw the paintings out, and they had moved out a couple of months later. Story 2. Hotel. It was just last 2023 in the month of November, when my boyfriend and I finally met here in SEA country. Since I was a professional working woman and we had different cultures, we decided to meet at the hotel. The day he called me, he had just landed at the airport. I was still at work, so I did not have any choice but to see him in the hotel right after my duty. At 7 in the evening, I messaged him that I was already in the lobby and ready to hug him, so he came down first. While we were inside the elevator going up together, I had that under the weather feeling out of nowhere. We read the appearance of elevator notification. Overload, and it was like the function wasn't good. I tried to ignore it, because I enjoyed the moments with him, his laugh and company. We got to talk a little, while I removed my stuff and arranged his stuff at the same time. Me, how was your day, love? My apology, I was a bit late. I know you're starving, but I need to clean my body first after this. I'm feeling so hot and sweating, so we can go out and eat dinner. Him, that's enough. Just do what you want to. I know you're exhausted already. That's my stuff. I can do that later. I was about to take shower when he called me for a hug. Before he hugged me, he stared at my neck. So I asked him, "Why, love? Is there something wrong?" He answered, "Nothing, sweetie. I'm just curious because of that on your neck. I see it's like scratch. Does it hurt? Where did you get this?" Feeling confused, I said, "I don't know." He replied, "Okay, take your time. Just call me if you need something," while kissing my forehead. After the shower, we went out for dinner, and of course, we made sure to lock the room and even turn the faucet off. Right after dinner, we decided to go back to the room because we both needed to rest. This time, before we headed inside, we both noticed that the door was slightly opened. I remained silent, although I had goosebumps already. We both just stared at each other without saying any words, and again, we tried to ignore it. As I've said, we were both messed up. We changed clothes and talked while lying on the bed. In the middle of our conversation, he asked me, "Him, did you spray something on your head?" Me, "No, never. You know my favorite scent is vanilla, or something milky or buttery. Just my one and only body spray and hair conditioner." Him, "Yeah, I know you. That's why now I'm asking you, because I smell something weird. It's kind of like a wax, or candle, or weird flower." I was just staring at him, because I knew there was something wrong inside, but he just didn't want me to be afraid. We continued what we were doing to avoid those scary feelings, but I couldn't avoid it, and I started to hug him. Right when I was about to grab his other hand, something surprised me. Something so cold tapped my hand. Plus, the fact it was a bit dark, because we were using the bedlight. So I started screaming, like almost losing my natural voice, and wanted him to cover my body. I also saw a black figure flashing so quick from the light of the bed lamp going to the wall. He did nothing but tried to help me calm down. He got up to turn the main lights back on.
He hugged me and massaged my back until my heartbeat turned to normal.
We both are close to God, so we acted like everything was normal. We decided to sleep. Tomorrow is another day, and definitely another appointment. Every time he asked me if I was fine, I would often say yes, but deep inside, I couldn't deny that I still wasn't completely okay. I didn't have any options but to open my phone beside him and just allowed him to take his time to sleep. My boyfriend had a sleeping issue, and that was why he was a sleeping machine. I was still awake, scrolling and feeling that everything was fine. I suddenly heard a humming voice and splashing waters around. My adrenaline rushed to give me the sign to just close my eyes. I pulled the blanket and covered my whole body. In the opposite way, things didn't go as what I had wanted it to. The voice hummed louder, and I felt the blanket slowly move down under the bed. I freaked out, cried, and woke him up. I told him what just happened. We both looked towards the corner of the television area. The TV turned on itself, and the chair near the table slowly moved by itself. All he did was reassured me it was nothing. It was not real, and it was all caused by our heavy days. He let me back to sleep under his arms with faith, while the time was almost 3 a.m. With a little bit of luck, I did. Eventually, I finally decided not to stay in the same room the next day. Yes, it was not the first night we wanted to have, but it is what it is. Story 3: The Dancing Animals. One day, my dad had a crazy dream to move to Wisconsin. My family migrated from California originally, but we'd already been in Washington for more than 10 years. I had only been about 4 years old. My dad asked his 3 brothers if they wanted to migrate to Wisconsin with our family, and they all agreed to go. There were at least 25 of us. My first uncle had himself, his wife, and 6 kids. My second uncle had himself, wife, and 4 kids. My third uncle had his wife and 2 kids. All my uncles, we drove our own vehicles. My family had 8 people total. On the way there, we saw a lot of views. It was until we reached Montana State that things got a little spooky. My dad and uncles got pulled over by a state trooper because they were all swerving off the road. He told my dad the closest rest stop was a few miles down. My dad decided to stop at that rest stop. It was getting closer to midnight. My dad told his brothers they were only there to get some shut-eyes. As soon as the sun comes up, they will head out. I guess my dad had a bad feeling. We went out, stretched, and used the restroom. My second auntie was telling my mom, "Did you see that man with white clothes cleaning the stalls?" My mom answered, "No, I saw nothing." We all went our separate ways and slept in our cars. Around 4 a.m. we were awoken to my older sister crying and screaming. I didn't know what was going on. My mom was tying a red string around my sister's neck, and she was white in the face. I heard her conversation while she was telling my mom what she saw. She saw a man in white clothes walk away into the woods. As she saw him walking, he bounced to the floor and disappeared and reappeared as a white cat. Then she heard the chanting voices and the animals dancing. She said they looked like white clouds. It scared her terribly. We asked the cleaner, who came by in the morning, and she told my auntie that this place was built on scared Native American grounds. That was probably why she heard the chants and the dancing animals. We quickly got settled in and left. Story 4. This happened to my dad. He was to play the funeral drum at someone's house. This is the ceremony where they let the spirit go after the funeral. The food was being prepared outside. As my dad was drumming, a piece of meat fell, hit his hands, and went onto the ground. He was a bit confused on how that happened. The meat looked dry, as if it had been left out for a while, but the food was just finished. My parents then came home. A few days later, we went to my aunt that is a psychic to do some other business. My mom brought it up to my aunt for her to look into. My aunt has the ability to see and converse with spirits. She said the little Poj Nixtug that was there said she was sorry. There were a lot of them at the ceremony. Traveling back, it grabbed a lot of meat and left them on top of the drum. A piece fell and hit my dad's hand. For him not to be scared, it wasn't intentional and went on its way. Ever since then, I never ate at a funeral anymore. Story 5. Buried treasures. On my 16th birthday, my dad lost his only living older brother to a brain tumor. It was a sad year and the worst time for a funeral. My uncle's funeral was just 2 weeks before Christmas and the New Year. It was hard to celebrate Christmas, let alone my 16th birthday happily. Before and after my uncle's death, some strange things started to happen. It wasn't happening to my family, but to my uncle's family. A week before my uncle's death, he has been telling my dad he had hid some money and wants my dad to look for it. My dad, of course, thought my uncle was going mad. My dad would ask, "Where did you hide it? What is it?" My uncle would answer, "You already know what it is. Keep it safe. They will try to steal it." My dad became even more confused. So my dad went to my uncle's house to look for his money and couldn't find it. My dad had told me when we entered the house, he felt like someone or something was watching his every move. Then my uncle passed away. After my uncle's death, his sons and daughter began to fight over the insurance money my uncle had left behind. Every day they would yell, fight, and argue about the money. My mom, a shaman, thought that maybe some evil entity has followed them home or is within them. So my mom decided to do the ritual for the whole family. After the ritual, the arguments stopped, but things had gotten more serious. One of my uncle's son couldn't be at home alone. He started hearing a baby crying and footsteps in the house. He would check all of the rooms for the baby and even go outside to see if he can hear the child crying. He couldn't find anything. At one point he got mad because the crying was happening every day. He started yelling for it to be quiet, but that only made the baby cries and the footsteps louder. One afternoon, my cousin was home alone. He was waiting for his wife to come home from work. As the kids was at his mother-in-law's house, he was cleaning the house, and then the crying started up again. Getting irritated and already frustrated, he tried to ignore the cries. The crying got louder and louder, and he felt as if the crying was in his ears. He then heard loud thumps coming from one of the rooms. As he slowly turned to see where it was coming from, he saw a very slender woman. She had a rotten face, crawling grudge-like, and crying like a baby coming from the room. My cousin just froze up while looking at her in fear. He said that the thing was crawling very slowly towards him, crying very loudly, and looked very sad. My cousin retrieved his senses back and ran out of the house. He was so scared he didn't want to return home. At night, he came to my house and cut off a branch from our peach tree. Also, kept our dog, known to have 6 senses, next to him. He couldn't sleep or eat properly. My mom had to hooplig for my cousin and do the whole house ritual again. This time, the spirits had revealed themselves to my mom. My mom said this to the whole family. What you saw was just Grandma. After your father died, she came to pay a visit. She saw that no one in the family loved each other. She wanted to give you guys a scare and make you guys love each other. All she wanted to do was say hello, but you ran from her. Everyone did. She was crying because she was sad. My cousin asked, then why was she crying like a baby? My mom then answered, that was your father crying. Your dad was still in the house. He was crying for you all. Grandma came to pick him up. 6 months after the incident, things became calmer and everything went back to normal. My cousin started eating healthier and got his sleeping pattern back. There weren't any more cryings and footsteps in the house. My mom said that Grandma already went back to the other side. My aunt had told me when she was sleeping. She can feel my uncle at the foot of the bed, watching her sleep. She felt safe when he was there. My uncle was watching over my aunt for 3 months before he left to heaven. It's been about 5 years now since my uncle has left us. Every year, when my birthday comes, I feel that he is with me. I love my uncle truly. Story 6, Grandma. It's been 3 years since my mom passed away. In those 3 years, I've only visited her gravesite twice. Once when we buried her, and once when my dad asked me to take him. I love my mom so much. I hate that she's not here with us anymore. I couldn't bear to see her resting place. After my mother passed, my wife and I had our first child. It breaks my heart knowing that my daughter will never know her grandmother. She would have loved her. This past Mother's Day, my wife convinced me to take our little family to visit my mom. When we got there, I couldn't help but cry, almost uncontrollably. My daughter was only 1.5, but she knew her dad was in pain. While I held her, she held me back. We stayed for half an hour or so, and then left. That night, my daughter, who still sleeps with us in our room, but on her own bed, was restless. She wasn't fussy, but she kept talking and moving around. At first, we thought that she was having dreams, but when I got up to use the restroom, I saw her sitting up waving her hands and speaking gibberish. I went over to give her a hug and kiss. That's when I noticed a picture next to my daughter's pillow. It was of my mother. The picture was recent. My mom had short hair in it because it had just started to grow back after her chemotherapy. She was smiling. I thought it was odd that my daughter had it, but I didn't suspect anything foul. I tucked her to sleep, and then went to use the restroom. On the way there, from the corner of my eye, I saw a faint light coming from the basement. Admittingly, I was a little spooked, but I went to go check anyway after using the toilet. Sometimes, my brother and sister do laundry in the basement and forget to turn off the lights. It wasn't the laundry room that the light was coming from. It was the storage room. I went to go turn off the light, but stopped in my tracks when I realized that my mother's recliner was extended. I gathered courage and went to inspect it. It wasn't plugged into any outlets, so it didn't make sense to me that it was extended. I plugged it in, retracted it, and then left back to my room. The next morning, I told my wife what had happened, and she was terrified. I laughed at her reaction and assured her that my brother or sister must have sat in the chair and forgot to recline it after. When we were having breakfast, I asked both of them if they had been in the basement recently and if either of them had been sitting in our mom's chair. They both said they hadn't. I felt very uneasy. I could see my wife's eyes widen as she looked at me. Before we could tell my siblings about what happened during the night, my daughter started getting very fussy. She wanted to get out of her high chair, so my sister picked her up and let her onto the ground. She ran off to the living room, and we continued to have breakfast while I told everyone about my experience last night. While we were discussing the event, little footsteps could be heard coming towards us. My daughter ran into my lap, holding my mom's picture again. She kept kissing it, and then she said, "Pooj, Grandma," in Hong. We were all surprised. My daughter knows how to say Taos, Grandma from mother's side, and Yom, Grandpa on either side, but she was never taught how to say Pooj. I took the picture, and all of a sudden, I felt at ease. I didn't feel afraid, but rather, I felt sad.
I could feel tears rolling down my cheeks, and then I felt little arms hugging my leg.
I looked down and saw my daughter smiling up at me. "Pooja," she said. I smiled at her and said, "Yeah, baby. That's your Pooj." Story 7, Rogers Lake, Mendota Heights. My brother and his friend left one night to this lake at Mendota Heights around 8 p.m. for bass fishing. Mind you, I don't even know why they wanted to fish during that time when it's literally dark, barely lights at the lake. So during their conversation, his buddy said, "I can't wait to fish there. There are always a pretty decent size during that time of the year," which was during 2018 summertime. As they arrived there with excitement, they walked to the dock and first cast Boom a nice 3 lb largemouth. Excited as his buddy was, my brother started to get bored. He is those types of people that doesn't fish much, but just tags along to have fun. It was close to 10 p.m. as the night was breezing. My brother said, "Hey, it's getting late. Let's go home." Since he was starting to get bored, but his buddy said, "Dude, fishes are still biting. I want to stay a little longer." Pretty much he couldn't do anything since they came together to the lake with his friend's manual car, and my brother doesn't drive manual. So he got stuck there with him until he was fed up, since there are only the two of them. His buddy was fishing for a while, and mind you, it was already 11:45 p.m., close to midnight. It started to get cold, and for anyone that fished in that lake, there's a mini trail to a forest on the right side once you enter the park. My brother was tired and said, "Dude, if you're not going, I'm going to head to the car first." His buddy replied, "I mean, it's getting late too, but wait for me." My brother started to walk back to the car, and suddenly there was a crying sound of a woman coming from the forest. As my brother was walking towards the car, and his buddy was right behind him, the sound of the crying got louder and louder. It started to follow them to the car. Right when they got inside, The crying sound was right next to my brother's ears. They were panicking and scared, as my brother was saying. I almost was in my pants. He started the car and my brother asked his buddy dude, "Did you hear that?" He answered, "Yeah, let's get out of here." They sped home and my brother slept that night. FYI, they are roommates. My brother couldn't sleep at all. He got sleep paralysis for 3 days straight. Ever since he encountered that crying sound that night, when they went fishing, he was super pale, and his hands were always cold. After 3 days, he came over to my house and explained everything to my parents. My mom did cause seep for him. My dad was a shaman, so he tied a string on him and said that he will do a ritual to look into it. My brother feels less overwhelmed, since my parents said that to him, and when my dad did his ritual, he finished everything. He called my brother over and lectured him. I remembered my dad saying, "It's already 8 p.m. Why did you guys go there?" "Must no loss. Go to eat poop." He said there was this white lady that was murdered there. They went during the time she was crying for help, but nobody was around, and she came out the exact same day that they were there. My dad lectured him and his buddy to never go there again during nighttime. My parents did shaman for my brother. After that, they never step into that area anymore after that scary encounter. Anyone that lives around St. Paul, does anyone have any scary encounters at that park? Story 8. My parents are not as compatible as of right now, and they've been getting into a lot of arguments lately. My father works 3-hour shift, so he gets home around early 6 in the morning. The sun has not come out yet, and as he parked his car and was ready to get out, then he saw a figure crawling behind his car coming around near him. There is a light pole above, shining behind to their driveway. My father was able to see the body, face, and clothes. It looked just like my mother, her clothes and her hair, just that her face was unusual. My father looked back, and it was gone. He rushed inside the house and was shocked to see my mother and my sister. He closed the door. My sister was getting ready for school, and my mother was getting food for my brother. He asked if my mother was just outside, and both my sister and mother replied no. My little sister said that my mother had just woken up because my sister woke up before her. My father told them what he saw outside, and my mother was scared because that thing had imitated into her. I believe that the one my father saw outside was my father's ex-girlfriend back in Thailand. They had both made a promise with the blood thing, and soon after, she got sick and died. My father was scared, so he pretty much tried to roll away the rock they had promised with, assuming that it'll destroy their promises, because the rock isn't at the same place anymore. The thing was, if they promised at a tree or something else, it had probably rot away. Instead, rocks don't. My father's ex-girlfriend keeps coming back because she followed him here, no matter how long it has been. That incident was told to me from my little sister. I'm married now. Every now and then when I visit my family, I just have this eerie feeling. Story 9. Nursing home encounters. It was a relief to graduate from nursing school. It was an even greater relief to pass my boards. Now, the next step was to find a job. I had applied to several hospital and clinic positions with no luck. Desperate to find a full-time position, I came across a job at a nursing home. It was not my ideal job, but it was a job. As they say, you have to start somewhere. I got hired as an RN working NOC shift. It was basically me and 2 aides working on knocks. The nurses' station is set up in the center of the facility with 3 wings branching off. It was around 2 a.m., and both of the aides that I was working with were heavy smokers. so they both stepped outside for a cigarette. I was sitting by the nurse's station, charting away. I was sitting where I was faced towards the middle wing. It was a wing that had been closed off. No residents resided in those rooms. There were a few rooms down that hall that was used for meetings and in services, but that was about it. After charting for a while, I looked up and saw this very lean, tall, dark man standing at the end of the hallway. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I knew it was a man. My heart started racing. I felt sick to my stomach, and my hands started shaking. I knew what I had seen. I was too terrified to look up again, so I turned away and never looked down that wing again for the rest of the night. That was my first encounter in a nursing home. The second experience happened late one evening. The PM nurse had told me that one of the canals told her someone had passed away, and if I could go and assess, I could not find any aides to go with me, so I summoned the courage to go in by myself. The lady was sitting in her recliner. When I walked in, I could tell that she had passed away. Her skin was pale and her chest was not rising. As I was making my way to confirm and check to make sure there was no pulse, something quickly ran past me. It was so quick and fast. I never made out to what exactly it was, but I saw it. I started getting goosebumps, but it was part of the job, so I felt for a pulse and there was none. I left the room as quickly as possible. There was this female resident who was bedridden and all her extremities were contracted. She was basically dependent on staffs for all cares and could not move around. She couldn't feed herself or even use the call light to call for help. Now this resident would frequently scream in terror, crying out that there were men in her room. Sometimes visitors who didn't know any better would thought she was possessed. Of course, one of her diagnoses was schizophrenia, so we didn't think much of it. We would try to calm her down by turning the TV/music on, giving her books to read, distracting her with activities, but nothing seemed to work. We would try to explain to her that there was no one in her room, but she would always respond with "they are at the edge of my bed," which at first seems scary, but after a while you get used to it. It got worse. No amount of distraction or medications would calm her down. She continued to scream in terror until she passed away. The night after she passed away, I was working. Two Tinas and I were sitting by the CNA station, which was located near her room. All of a sudden, the call light outside of her room turned on. The room was still empty at this point. We all looked at each other. Being the supervisor, I did not want to say anything that would scare the girls. So I calmly replied with, "Must be an electrical problem." One of the younger girls quickly said, "I am not going in there by myself." The other CNA walked into the room and turned the call light off. We didn't say anything about it until later on that night. I came out of the staff room and saw the light was on again. I freaked out a little and got goosebumps, but then I thought one of the Kanas must be playing a trick. I went and found the girls, and they were both doing cares on another resident. I asked them if they had noticed that the call light is on again. Both of them answered, no. Nothing showed up on their pages that the call light was on. That was when I started getting scared. Anytime someone puts the call light on, it sends a page to the CNA pages. This would be the second time now that this has happened. One of the girls then mentioned, that call light has never been used or turned on. The resident that had lived in there could not physically push on the call light button. But now, after she passed away, it has been turning on. Let's just say for the rest of the night, we avoided walking near that room. Story 10. When I was a teen, I'd always accompany my parents to go a teb, garden. One time my mom really wanted to go to the garden to pick some veggies really quick, but it was already 6 p.m. My dad was busy that night, so my mom asked me to anus luagmosuatiba accompany her to the garden because she didn't want to be alone there when it gets dark. The garden was about 45 minutes north of the Twin Cities, so we knew that when we get there, we'd only have a little bit of time to pick some vegetables before it got dark. To get to the garden, we'd have to get through some dirt road in the woods before reaching the farmland owned by an old couple. We got to the garden and I helped my mom pick some vegetables for a while. Then I went to the car to go grab a gardening tool. The car was parked next to our corn. In the corner of my eyes, I saw a black figure bending up and down between the corn rows. I looked over and saw nothing. I thought it was probably just an animal, but all of a sudden, I heard the corn leaves moving. There was no wind that evening. I took a closer look, and the leaves of only one corn plant was continuously moving by itself, and the rest of the corns were still. I freaked out and ran to my mom and told her what had happened. We both looked toward the corn and saw that it was still moving. I was surprised, and she assured me that it was just nothing. At this time, the sun was down with only the sun rays left to light our way back. We quickly picked the vegetables we wanted, and then scrambled to pack all of our tools and vegetables in the car. As we drove through the dark dirt road, a rock happened to hit the passenger side, where I sat, of our car as we drove, and it freaked us out more. Frightened, my mom started calling our spirits home. Once we got onto the freeway, my mom told me, on our way here, I saw a little girl with her back towards the dirt road by the bushes. My first thought was, why would the landowners let their child play by the woods? But when you said you saw something in the corn rows, that's when I put it together that the little girl was a Podge Nuksug ghost, because I remember the landowners don't have children. We stopped going to the garden in the evening, and the next season, we found a different place to Oteb, and made sure it wasn't a place where we had to go through wooded roads. Story 11. Question of the day. For those who are shaman, when you move to a new house, how do you remove your altar? Do you have to do a ritual or let them know you will be moving? Do you break it apart and bring them to the new house? Can you burn it? Curious, because back then, when I went to go help my dad clean their house to sell, my sister took the shaman altar outside and burned it. My dad left to go stay with his girlfriend, so he was not there when she did that. Afterwards, I felt goosebumps, and we started hearing things around the house for the next few weeks. It got to the point where my in-laws had to come hooplik for my husband, because he heard a voice calling from the woods for him to help her. Then, something hit my dad's old truck, super loud. We didn't even finish cleaning that night, and just left because my husband got too spooked. Could it have been because we burnt the altar? Or was the altar protecting the house, and after it got burnt, whatever was there became active? We sold my dad's house, but I still get chills when we get near the area, and I don't even have the courage to drive by the house. Story 12. Kalina Vang. My name is Kalina Vang. Tu and Kia were two Hmong married couples who always had problems. See, Tu was constantly cheating on Kia. She was always doing her best to ignore it and deny it, but she often heard from friends and family that they had seen Tu leaving a hotel or house with another woman. Finally getting sick of it, Kia confronted Tu in Hmong. I love you, and I just want what is best for us. But if I hear another story about you cheating on me, I swear I will leave you. Tu laughed it off, knowing that Kia wasn't capable of leaving him, or was in any position of ever doing so. 2 days later, Tu and Kia attended a family gathering. Kaya was sitting down and laughing, catching up with old friends. Kia's aunt finally came and took a seat next to her. In Hong, Kia, do know where your husband was yesterday? Kia nodded her head. Yeah, at work. Kia's aunt looked her sternly in the eyes. Kia, yesterday I saw him walking out of a hotel downtown with another woman. Kia slowly looked her aunt in the eyes in embarrassment. After the party, Kia and Tu drove home in silence. How was work yesterday? Kia asked. It was good. Why? Tu answered. Kia sat in silence for a while. Then why did someone see you walk out of a hotel with another woman? Tu laughed. Who the HL told you that? Kia turned towards him. I'm serious. Didn't I clearly tell you that if you cheated again, I would leave you? Tu ignored her. Do you hear me? I'm leaving you. It's over. Kia screamed. Tu pulled to a stop on a bridge. You want to leave? Go. Get out of the car. Kia, overwhelmed, opened the car door and slammed it shut. Tu came out of the car also and walked towards Kia. You want to leave me, huh? Then leave. Leave. And with that, Tu pushed Kia over the bridge, sending her head first into the water, hitting her head on a rock and died. Before Tu realized it, he ran back into his car and drove home. A few weeks later, Tu started to hear some weird noises. After the noises came a voice calling his name. He knew it was Kia. He knew she was mad, and he was scared. He finally got the courage to confront his family members and explained everything that happened. I cheated on her, and she said she would leave, but I didn't believe her. Then I got mad and threw her over a bridge. His family decided that it would be best if they performed a shaman ritual. After the ritual, they clearly explained to Tu, tonight, sleep under your bed. That way when she comes, she won't see you, and she'll have to leave. Do you understand? Tu nodded and did as he was told. That night, he went under his bed and waited for Kia to come. T-H-U-M-P. 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 T-O-U. You. Tu was frightened as ever. He closed his eyes as he heard Kia come closer and closer. Soon enough, he heard her right next to the bed, and he opened his eyes. Now you see, Tu died that night. Can you guess why? Well, you see, when he explained to his family about everything, he forgot one VER. Why important detail? He forgot to say that when Kia was thrown off the bridge, she dived head first. Still don't get it. Here's a clue. They say you come back as a spirit the same way you died. So if she died head first, she was upside down. Story 13. The Flower. My boyfriend and I were taking in the phone. Then I started to scare him with some ghost stories. He suddenly told me a ghost story. I actually like it and want to share it. One day, this guy went to visit his girlfriend. He'll always brought flowers to her. They lived pretty far from each other. He forgot to buy flowers for her, so he decided to go to the nearby cemetery to pick up a flower for his girlfriend, since it's close to where he was heading to. When he went to the cemetery, he looked for the fresh flower. He came along and found one. He then left to his girlfriend's place. On his way to his girlfriend's house, he heard a girl's voice say, Muab kov lob paje robkab los. Give me back my flower. He didn't care much and kept walking till he got to his girlfriend's house. He spent the whole day at his girlfriend's place. When he looked at his watch, it was already late, so he said that he'll be heading back home. When he walked past the cemetery, he felt this cold breeze. He didn't feel comfortable at all. He kept hearing the girl's voice saying, Koje Muab Kov Lub Pav Kov Kav Tug Lom? Muab Kov Lub Paje Rab Kov Los Rau Kov. Where you put my flower? Give it back to me. He then had a terrifying feeling and ran about a good 15 minutes. He looked back, listened carefully, then shook it off. He started to walk his way home. About 5 minutes later, he heard the voice again. This time, the voice was closer to him. He turned around and saw this lady in home clothes standing in front of him with her hand out asking for her flower. The guy got really terrified and ran home. Once he got home, he went straight to his room. His mom came in and asked him what was wrong. He told his story to his mom, and she said, Luag neo bluag. Coach mustabsis cavlium. They was there, but you went to cause trouble, then forget it. The mom left. A while after she came back with those red and white strings, Pluakai tees, and tied it onto his hand. They soon did a ritual thing for him. They asked her to go away, but she wouldn't leave him alone. She told them that he had to return the flower back. A couple days later, he got more sick. They did the jingle bell thingy again. This time, she said that it's not going to be a warning. She waited too long for the flower. She was going to take him as her flower. They then went to buy a flower and take him to the cemetery. He gave the flower back. Next thing you know, he passed out and Hay took him home. 3 days later, he woke up. Everyone was around him. He was glad to have woken up again. Thank you for always supporting the channel and welcoming its videos. Wishing you good health, and remember to subscribe to the channel to achieve 1,000 subscriptions.